Performance evaluation on government expenditure programs in Korea. The fundamental question in budgetary reform and development is how a central government should distribute public resources across diverse projects and programs. The Korean government's answer was to assign budget across programs based on their performance. The Korean central government adopted performance-oriented reforms in order to make its ministries and agencies pay closer attention to their performance and whether they attained their planned goals and objectives. The reforms also aimed to make them responsible for their own expenditures. In essence, the main objective of the policies was to evaluate expenditure programs of line ministries and agencies in order to establish criteria for resource allocation across multiple agencies, projects, and programs. One criterion for this resource allocation is performance evaluation, basically meaning if you perform well, I will give you more money, but if you perform worse, I will take away resources from you. Thus, the policies entail line ministries and agencies evaluating their own expenditure programs, where they would calculate performance scores and the Ministry of Strategy and Finance would allocate budget according to these scores. Such policies are very relevant to the key questions of budgeting. The first question is, on what basis should government distribute public resources across diverse projects and programs? The second question is how to improve performance of government agencies. And third, how to improve the effectiveness of government programs. A performance evaluation system aims to answer those three key budget questions. The early stage of the performance-oriented evaluation was the Self-Assessment Budgetary Programs, or SABP, implemented in 2005, which let the central ministries assess their expenditure programs themselves. SABP, which benchmarked the Program Assessment Rating Tool, or PART, of the George Walker Bush administration in the United States, was a self-assessment system by which all central government agencies assessed themselves the performance of all expenditure programs. The SABP system provided the Ministry of Strategy and Finance, the Korean Economics and Finance Ministry, with the performance information of all expenditure programs carried out by central ministries and agencies. Each ministry selects 1/3 of their expenditure programs to be evaluated by SABP in conjunction with the Ministry of Strategy and Finance, who provided a guideline for the selection, reflecting duplication or overlapping with other programs, improvement of delivery system or resource allocation process, modification of performance objectives or indicators, establishment of monitoring system on ongoing programs, program evaluation and performance analysis, and enhancement of program achievement. Using the evaluation checklist provided by the Ministry of Strategy and Finance, the ministries conducted standardized assessment on the performance of expenditure programs. The total score of each expenditure program was graded on a scale of maximum of 100, with any expenditure programs with their total score of 90 or higher were categorized as very good. Ones with their score of 80 to 90 were good. Ones with their total score of 70 to 80 were fair. Ones with their score of 60 to 70 were unsatisfactory. And programs with their score of 60 and less were categorized as very unsatisfactory. Based on this assessment, the Ministry of Strategy and Finance made final annual performance evaluation results, along with recommendations on how to improve the performance of expenditure programs of the central ministries. The final performance results were used in budgeting by re-examining and adjusting the size and priority of expenditure programs according to the performance results, with intentions to restructure or even terminate some programs based on the results. Later, the Ministry of Strategy and Finance noted that any expenditure programs in the categories of unsatisfactory and very unsatisfactory should be penalized by cutting up to 10% of their previous year's budget. In contrast, expenditure programs whose categories were good and very good became candidates for budget increase in the following year. However, in the years following the implementation of SABP, many studies found multiple unexpected problems and outcomes different from the original intents. First, the number of government expenditure programs assessed by SABP has not been even across years, with a decreasing trend in the number of expenditure programs under the SABP assessment. Second, it was suggested that the SABP did not significantly enhance the overall performance of government expenditure programs in the period of 2005 to 2011, contrary to the expectations of the Ministry of Strategy and Finance, with assessment results more or less stagnant across the years. Third, the assessment scores were suggested to be inflated, with the agencies showing a tendency to evaluate the majority of their programs as fair, neither too positive nor too negative. Such issues led to studies' negative evaluations on SABP by some studies, although allowing it is too early to make a clear verdict on it. First, the central government agencies showed favor to planning and management than to performance and feedback, consistent with practices focusing on input-oriented management rather than outcome and performance-oriented management. Second, a positive relationship between the performance scores of the expenditure programs and budget allocated to the programs was not clear. Third, the preliminary self-assessment scores by the government agencies were not consistent with the final scores modified by the Ministry of Strategy and Finance. And fourth, the National Assembly of Korea, which ultimately signs off on budget allocations, did not pay serious attention to the performance evaluation scores collected from SABP when it appropriated budget. Ultimately, these issues led to a call for reforms to the performance-oriented evaluation system, giving rise to the implementation of the Integrated Evaluation System on government programs. The Ministry of Strategy and Finance introduced the Integrated Evaluation System on Government Programs, or IESGP, in 2016 in order to address the problems related to SABP. Consistent with SABP, the primary objectives of IESGP were to enhance the accountability and responsibility of central government agencies relevant to their expenditure programs, to improve performance of central agencies by providing them with tangible incentives, and to link their performance results to budget allocated to them. On the flip side, IESGP differs from SABP in that first, it underlined the integration of divided evaluations across general budgetary projects, R&D projects, and regional development projects. Second, the IESGP is intended to evaluate all expenditure programs every year, rather than the 1/3 annually with SABP. Third, the Ministry of Strategy and Finance allows more discretion and autonomy to the central ministries in assessing the performance of their expenditure programs. Fourth, the IESGP streamlines the items and criteria, or indices, of the ministerial performance evaluations. Fifth, the IESGP adopts an additional step in performance evaluation of government expenditure programs in addition to self-assessment, called meta-assessment. And sixth, the Ministry of Strategy and Finance announced that it will provide substantial incentives to any central ministries of high performance according to the meta-assessment, and would examine if the central agencies follow the suggestions and comments in the following fiscal year. One of the most important objectives of performance evaluation system is to link the performance evaluation scores of government expenditure programs with budget which is assigned to the programs in the process of budgeting. However, the Korean cases of the self-assessment budgetary programs and the integrated evaluation system on government programs showed that the mechanism linking performance with budgeting did not work as effectively as anticipated. There existed two phases for this linkage. First, the Ministry of Strategy and Finance should reflect the performance evaluation scores of all expenditure programs when it compiles the executive budget. Second, the National Assembly of Korea also should consult the performance evaluation scores of ministerial programs when it appropriates resources across the expenditure programs. Under the previous and current performance evaluation systems, the association between performance scores of expenditure programs and budget assigned to the programs was not clear. When the central ministries are not sure of a clear association between performance scores and budget, they would lose motivation to comply with the performance evaluation systems. Thus, both Ministry of Strategy and Finance and the National Assembly should seek out effective ways to reflect the performance evaluation scores of government expenditure programs on their budget in the courses of budget compilation and appropriation, which will result in performance improvement of government expenditure programs and effective resource allocation across government programs.